When the highest court in the land strikes down a sitting president's economic policy, you're witnessing something that doesn't happen often. Markets responded immediately, investors recalibrated their positions, and companies that had been bracing for financial pain suddenly saw a different future ahead. But this story isn't just about one ruling or one day of stock market movement. It's about the collision between executive power and constitutional limits, and what happens when billions of dollars hang in the balance. Let's back up and understand how we got here. Last year, the president invoked emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs on imports coming into the United States. These weren't small adjustments or targeted measures aimed at specific industries. We're talking about a baseline duty of 10% on essentially everything crossing American borders, with additional charges ranging from 15 to 50% depending on the country of origin. Some of those rates were later renegotiated and reduced, but the core framework remained in place. The administration justified this by citing a federal law designed for national emergencies, arguing that economic security qualified as such an emergency. Thousands of companies weren't buying that logic. Businesses across the country and around the world filed lawsuits challenging the legality of these tariffs. They weren't just complaining about the economic impact, though that was substantial. They were arguing that the president had overstepped constitutional authority by using emergency powers for what was fundamentally a trade policy decision. And they wanted their money back, the duties they'd already paid under what they considered an illegal framework. The Supreme Court heard the case and delivered its verdict. In a 6-3 decision, the justices sided with the challengers. They ruled that the tariff program exceeded the authority granted under the Emergency Powers Law. The majority opinion, coming from a court with a conservative tilt, sent a clear message about the limits of executive action even when national security or economic concerns are invoked. Financial markets responded swiftly. The Nasdaq climbed over 1%. The broader market indices all moved higher, but the really telling movements came from specific sectors and companies. Toy makers saw their shares rise. Furniture retailers, both mass market and luxury, posted gains. Solar panel manufacturers and home builders moved upward. These weren't random movements. They were companies that had been directly hit by the tariff structure, suddenly seeing relief on the horizon. One equity trader summed up the immediate market psychology well. The perception, at least initially, is that removing these tariffs should ease inflationary pressure. That matters enormously right now because inflation has been the dominant economic storyline for years. Consumers have felt it. The Federal Reserve has responded to it with interest rate policies, and businesses have struggled to navigate it while maintaining margins and competitive pricing. But here's where things get complicated. The president called the ruling a disgrace and indicated there's a backup plan in the works. That creates uncertainty. Markets might celebrate today, but companies still need to plan for tomorrow. If alternative tariff structures get implemented through different legal mechanisms, the relief could prove temporary. And there's another massive issue lurking in the background. Economists estimate that striking down these tariffs could require refunding more than $175 billion in duties already collected. That's not a small accounting adjustment. That's real money that has to flow back to businesses, creating both logistical challenges and questions about how the government manages that process. The economic data released the same day added another layer to the story. Growth slowed more than analysts expected in the final quarter of last year. Inflation ticked upward in December. These are the kind of numbers that complicate Federal Reserve decision-making about interest rates. Traders are betting the next rate cut comes in June, but that depends on economic conditions playing out in predictable ways. Court rulings that fundamentally reshape trade policy don't exactly make forecasting easier. What makes this particularly significant is what it reveals about the balance between different branches of government. The executive branch tried to use emergency powers for broad economic policy. The judicial branch said no, that exceeds your authority. This is an abstract constitutional theory. It has immediate, measurable effects on businesses, consumers, prices, and economic planning. When companies don't know what tariff structure will be in place next month or next quarter, they can't make confident decisions about sourcing, pricing, or investment. Looking ahead, several scenarios could unfold. The administration might pursue alternative legal pathways to implement tariffs, potentially through different statutory authorities or through traditional trade negotiation processes. Congress could get involved, either supporting executive action through legislation or pushing back against it. Other countries will be watching closely and adjusting their own trade policies in response. And those thousands of lawsuits seeking refunds will work their way through the system, potentially creating ongoing financial and administrative headaches. For businesses, the challenge is navigating an environment where the rules keep shifting. Do you plan based on the current ruling, or do you hedge against potential new tariff structures? Do you pass costs to consumers, absorb them, or restructure supply chains? These aren't simple decisions, and they affect everything from what products appear on shelves to what prices consumers pay. What we're seeing is how quickly certainty can evaporate in modern markets. One court decision, however legally sound, doesn't automatically resolve the underlying tensions about trade policy, inflation concerns, or the proper scope of executive power. It shifts the terrain, but the fundamental debates continue. Here's what's clear: when the Supreme Court strikes down a major presidential initiative, especially one affecting hundreds of billions in economic activity, the ripples extend far beyond one day's stock market gains. The question isn't whether this matters, it obviously does. The question is what comes next. And right now, that answer remains uncertain. For analysis that cuts through the noise and explains what these big developments actually mean for the real world, stay connected with Allura Updates. Because understanding the story behind the headlines is how you make sense of moments like these.